This is update for January 28, 2024, day 704 of the war, and of the date update. Also catch up for January 26 and 27. As always, I'm going to start with general strategic updates, and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the front line in Ukraine. I'm going to start with Russia today. So the head of Russian, I would call it external intelligence agency. I'm not sure if that's the best way to translate, or foreign intelligence agency. Basically, it's a part of the KGB that's focused on intelligence operations outside of Russia. His name is Sergei Naryshkin. He stated in the interview to Russian media that the destiny of Ukrainian state is very sad, and that Russia will not stop halfway. This is a very clear message to those, I would say, in the West who believe that Russia is willing to negotiate and happy just to swallow the pieces of Ukraine that so far it captured. Russia is really looking for the entire of Ukraine. I would say that those people in Hungary who already stating that they would like to have a piece of Ukraine as well, they will be disappointed because Russia will get all of the Ukraine if this were to happen. That would be hopefully a lesson for those people in Hungary. Unfortunately, it will be at the expense of Ukraine. The other topic that I would like to briefly discuss is situation in the Near East or Middle East, whatever you call it, with attack of the U.S. military base in Jordan. As we all know, there are 3 soldiers dead and quite a bit more wounded. This whole attack looks like a trap and desire to pull U.S. in the land war in the Middle East. That's gonna be that where U.S. will be bogged down essentially, because it will require a lot of boots on the ground, and essentially it's gonna turn into another Afghanistan, Vietnam, Iraq, where there is really no real solution. And I would say that's probably Iran. They're fully aware of that, and they want sort of US to make sort of that mistake and get into this land war. And the reason I'm saying land war is because as opposed to the air attacks, because air attacks, they will not do anything, and they're not going to solve anything. As we can see with West Yemen, those air attacks, they're useless essentially. They're a huge waste of financial resources because those missiles are super expensive, and whatever they hit, even if they hit, is definitely not the worst money that's being spent. So essentially, it's a losing game. And without boots on the ground, you cannot really do anything. And for West Yemen, you need a lot of them. So it's effectively a dead end for the US and for obviously UK. That's there as well in terms of kind of inability to change the situation. So effectively standoff where I would say West cannot really win. The Iran, Russia, China, all of that group of countries, they seeing that very clearly, and essentially that really emboldens this bloc even further. There's another negative effect for the West from all of this, because this will hit as inflation West, and obviously Europe much more, US as well eventually, in terms of inflation. So again, inflation, despite their sort of cheerleading, is not under control in Europe, and not under control in the US. and one of the biggest driver of that is actually housing market in the U.S. that's continuing to grow, and essentially without stopping growth and reduce and actually house price declines in the U.S., you can really reverse inflation in the U.S., and it also will be related to the softening labor market in the U.S. and quite a bit of layoffs. So far, it's still holding on. There are definitely cracks in the U.S. labor market, but still looks on the whole okayish. So we'll see what happens there. But going back to the situation in this Yemen, Jordan, and Israel is another sort of area there. It's essentially no-win situation for the U.S. and for the U.K. and for the West as a whole. And that's, again, the whole point is to show weakness of the West and to basically rally up more countries who will join this potential alliance of Iran, China, and Russia. And North Korea obviously goes there as well, because that's, as I mentioned before, this is effectively this is extension of China. This is not independent country. Also adding to this explosive situation inside of the U.S. With a standoff, and I would call it a standoff between the Republican and Democratic Party. That's not just, Texas is just a focal point of all of this, where it's all collided effectively. But the standoff is much, much more broader. It's a societal standoff. And as I mentioned before, it's the situation looks very, very much similar to how it looked in the U.S. before the first civil war. And hopefully that's going to be the only civil war. But it rhymes nearly perfectly, I would say, with that situation. And hopefully that's going to get avoided somehow. Now I'm going to switch to situation closer, basically, to the front line in Ukraine. And I mentioned about the terrible birth rates in Russia. While in Russia they're terrible, in Ukraine they're actually horrible, as you can see from this chart. And actually it doesn't have 2023. There is number from 2023. It's actually 187,000 children were born in 2023. So here it shows 209 were born in 2022. So it's roughly another 10% down. Just to explain, just to kind of give some perspective on the situation. So if we go to 91, 90, 92, this number is roughly 600,000 children born, is consistent with population of about 50 million people. Ukraine had actually 52 million people at that time. And so if we look at this 187,000 children, that's really consistent with population of roughly plus minus 17 million people. So as you can see, Ukraine in 30-year time span, reduced its population roughly to a third of the original size. So it's quite a bit of a disaster. Having said that, I wouldn't say that this is, the end of the world, and that's it. It's not so gloomy. The actually real answer is not about in the quantity of people, but actually in quality of people, and that's really in the hands, of Ukrainians and what they decide to do. So that's I would say the fate is not sort of decided. It's not final. As I said many times before, there is always way. There's always solution. It's really always in the hands of the society that's in trouble. So again, this is not final. This is not the end of the world. It's definitely terrible. I'm not going to say this is great, but at the same time, there's always solution, as I said before. Another topic about Ukraine, and political. I mentioned before that Ukrainian parliament is essentially illegitimate at this point because their term has expired in October of 2023. So then they decided to, okay, we're going to vote ourselves into existence for whatever, another, until as long as the war is going on. Obviously, that's effectively it's a dictatorship. It's turning into dictatorship. However, a lot of this members of the parliament in Ukraine, they trying to jump the sinking ship, or what they perceive as a sinking ship. As as I say, there's a saying about rats jumping the sinking ship. So this is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. I mentioned this before, that now the original number of members was like 450. Because of the Russian aggression in 2014, it was reduced to like 437, I believe. Then right now, because a lot of them are quitting, it's down to 400. And it turns out there's 17 more, the expressed desire to quit. So that would be, 383. So as you can imagine, that's it's, as I said, it's a quite a trend, to the point that head of Ukrainian, one of the sort of key heads in Ukrainian parliament stated that they will simply not allow them to leave. So essentially, it's like you're becoming a prisoner, and you cannot leave, you cannot jump the ship, which is, I think, is totally mistaken, and it just shows that this whole even political system is unraveling in Ukraine, and it's just gonna, this whole process is gonna accelerate, and it probably will accelerate even more after March of 2024, when also Ukrainian president will become illegitimate, because his term is gonna expire at the end of March of 2024. So I would say the best solution for Ukraine is actually having election with the people that's there in Ukraine. Yes, there's a lot of people out, there's a lot of lost territories, but at the same time, this is the people who who decided to stay, who view their destiny with Ukraine, and who continue fighting. So in some way, there is quite a bit of fairness that they should decide the fate of the country going forward. And so, before I was sort of on sidelines, so with these elections, I would say they are desperately actually needed to actually change this broken political group that's running Ukraine, and it's running Ukraine into the ground. Otherwise, it's, as I stated before, it's going to turn into 1917 moment, which will be completely destructive, and it looks like it's going to happen earlier than Russia's, and that will lead to basically complete collapse and Russia's takeover of the entire of Ukraine. So, Ukraine is facing definitely tough choices, very bleak future, if there are no meaningful and I would say revolutionary changes. Because at this point, evolutionary changes are not going to be enough. Ukraine really need, at this point, revolutionary changes. Now I'm going to switch to the walkthrough over the front line in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. So first situation along the state border remains more or less stable. There is no imminent signs of any kind of Russian invasion. Whatever Russia has right now, and it's roughly 600,000 troops involved in the war of Ukraine. What this really means is that they simply don't have enough to invade at this point. The only way Russia can invade is when Ukrainian army will start to disintegrate and the numbers going to go down, less equipment and so on, because they may scramble another, at best, 200,000 troops, probably more like 150 for invasion, again, going towards attacking Kyiv. But again, this only gonna work out if there is essentially very little desire and very few troops left on the Ukrainian side. Otherwise, it's going to be the same disaster that Russia experienced in February, March of 2022. So they learned their lessons. I don't think they're going to repeat that mistake until, as I said, Ukraine gets to the point of disintegrating, which I would say the way it goes, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's not a distant future either. That's why I said that without revolutionary changes in Ukraine, it's heading in that direction. Now let's look at the situation on the North Luhansk front line. So things here are somewhat similar. Russian troops continuing their attack along this road that goes to Kupiansk, as you can see. They even claim that they captured village here where there's this tip of this white arrow. It's possible, I'm not excluding that that's the case, but there is no factual confirmation for that. So I'll just sort of keep it sort of open, and we'll see what happens. If there's no confirmation, in the coming days, then it's just basically propaganda, Russian propaganda story. But at the same time, I'm not excluding that this is going to happen in the coming days or weeks, because as I mentioned before, Ukrainian army is definitely, becoming weaker by day due to equipment losses, very little resupply, and obviously the most important is morale and the quality of the troops, as I mentioned before many times. That's really the key factor, is actually people is who sort of fights, and not the equipment. You can have all the best equipment in the world and lose the war. It's really about people. It would be probably not the best way to express it, but people kill, not the equipment kills. So it's always about people. Then Russian forces continuing their pressure here in the southern part of this front line, where they simply would like to eliminate Ukrainian bridgehead on this side of this stream, and the immediate goal is this town Liman here. But so far they did not get any traction here. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. The northern sector is quiet, as it usually is. And then also southern is fairly quiet. There was some super weak attack towards Ivanivsky, but I won't even put the arrow, because it's essentially non-event, let's put this way. So overall, this front line is quiet for now. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here kind of remain more or less the same. Russian pressure around Avdiivka without any Russian advances. It doesn't mean that things are stable or great. There's just, I would say, invisible things, or sort of invisible from the person who is not really on the, fighting in a, building to building fight. But I'm sure there is pressure. There are sort of, say, Russian side is slowly building its eventual success around Avdiivka by inflicting losses on the Ukrainian forces. That not to say that Russian forces don't get, they have suffered losses as well. But again, there is this huge advantage of 1-4 that Russia has in its resources. And so, because of as I said, exchange is roughly 1-1. Maybe here it's 1-2, because Russia it's a fairly good, I'd say, position to defend from Ukrainian perspective, but still, it's not favorable in Ukraine side in terms of, like, let's say, losses of 1-5, 1-10. That's clearly not there. Then Russian forces continuing their pressure in this Novomikhailivka salient. As you can see, they would like to continue to develop the this Marinka salient further, and then they're trying to sort of create a pressure on Ukrainian troops to squeeze them out of to force them to leave this Novomikhailivka salient. So far, no advances here either. Next, let's move to the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet. Actually, this is by mistake here, but generally, situation is quiet on this front line. Now I'll finish with the situation along the Dnipro River. So here things remain the same. Russian troops trying to actually attacking with actual troops. Ukrainian bridgehead trying to eliminate it, so far without success. So again, this is going to be sort of status quo. I would say the initiative here, paradoxically, is actually in the hands of the Ukrainian command. This is probably the only section of the front line where the initiative is actually in Ukrainian command's hand, because it's their decision whether they want to continue this bridgehead to exist and potentially exploit this opportunity, or abandon it. Basically, Russian command, Russian troops, within the current situation, they will be super costly for Russian side to eliminate this bridgehead. And despite all of these attacks, they basically waste of Russian resources. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.